We live in an age where the artist is forgotten. He is a researcher. I see myself that way. Now that was a quote by David Hockney, and David Hockney is the artist who we will be studying in art history today. So David Hockney is an English painter, a draftsman, a printmaker, a stage designer, and a photographer. As an important contributor to the pop art movement of the 1960s, he is considered one of the most influential British artists in the 20th century. So today, together, we are going to dive into the life, the artwork, and the legacy of David Hockney. Before we get started though, there are 3 key terms that I want you to remember. They are going to come up through our discussion today, and I just might quiz you on them in the end. So here they are. Swimming pools, pop art, modern. All right. Remember those 3 terms. They are going to come up as we get started here. Here we go, diving into the life and the artwork of David Hockney. One of 5 children, David Hockney was born on July 9th, 1937 into a working-class family in the industrial city of Bradford in northern England. His father, a conscientious objector during the Second World War, had a kind heart, as Hockney remembers. He thought there should be justice in the world, Hockney says. He also romanticized the ideals of the Communist Party in Russia. Now, while adopting his father's anti-war stance, Hockney remained resistant to the ideologies and the hierarchies. Now, as a schoolboy, Hockney says of himself, "I was always quite serious, but cheeky." Art was something he knew he wanted to do very early in life. At his school, academically promising boys were forced to drop art as a subject, so David Hockney, he deliberately failed his exams. At the age of 16, Hockney was admitted to the acclaimed Bradford School of Art, where he studied traditional painting and life drawing alongside Norman Stevens, David Oxenby, and John Locker. Unlike most of his peers, Hockney was working class, and he worked tirelessly, especially in his life drawing classes. Hockney recalls, "I was there from 9 in the morning till 9 at night." In 1957, he was called up for national service, but as a conscientious objector, he served out his time as a hospital orderly. In 1959, Hockney went on to study at the Royal College of Art in London and was taught by several well-known artists. At the time, the college asked students to submit an essay along with their final work. Hockney refused. He wanted to be judged solely on the basis of his art. Remarkably, the RCA, they had a basis in tradition. They actually changed their rules and allowed him to graduate. Now, Hockney's first solo show, held in 1963 at John Casman's Gallery, proved very successful. The following year, he traveled to Los Angeles for the first time, where he met leading intellectual and artist figures, including Christopher Isherwood and designer Ozzie Clark, with whom he struck up a close friendship and later traveled to the Grand Canyon. He would later be best man at Clark's wedding to Cecilia Birtwell, of whom he would paint and draw many portraits of. Over the following few years, he resided almost permanently in California, teaching at various universities including Berkeley and UCLA, but also traveling extensively around the US and Europe. During this period, he painted some of his best-known works, including A Bigger Splash. He also began to design productions for the ballet, opera, and the theater. Now, Hockney painted this work while at the University of California in Berkeley, probably his most famous painting he created. A Bigger Splash was created as the final result of two smaller paintings in which he developed his ideas. These were A Little Splash and The Splash. Now, A Bigger Splash is a considerably larger work. It is measuring approximately 94 by 94 inches. Now, Hockney was one of the first artists to make extensive use of acrylic paint, which was then a relatively new artistic medium. He felt that as a fast-drying substance, it was more suited to depicting the hot, dry landscapes of California than traditional oil paints. He painted this work by stapling the canvas to his studio wall. In A Bigger Splash, Hockney explores how to represent the constantly moving surface of the water. The splash was based on a photograph of a swimming pool that Hockney had seen in a pool manual. He was intrigued by the idea that a photograph could capture the event of a split second, and sought to recreate this in a painting. The buildings are taken from a previous drawing Hockney had done of a Californian home. The dynamism of the splash contrasts strongly with the static and rigid geometry of the house, the pool edge, the palm trees, and the striking yellow diving board, which are all carefully arranged in a grid containing the splash. This gives the painting a disjointed effect that is absolutely intentional, and in fact, one of the hallmarks of Hockney's style. The effect is one of stylization and artificially drawing on the aesthetic vocabulary of pop art and fusing that with cubism. Now, Hockney said in his autobiography, "I love the idea, first of all, of painting like Leonardo, all his studies of water, swirling things. And I loved the idea of painting this thing that lasts for 2 seconds. It takes me 2 weeks to paint this event that lasts for 2 seconds." Now, while Hockney paints a broad range of subjects, some of his most masterful compositions are his portraits of the late 1960s. These offer unrivaled, almost cinematic insights into the mood and culture of this transitional decade in American history. This painting here he made in 1968. Fred and Marcia Wiseman, art collectors and friends of Hockney, who appear outside their residence as if stepping outside to greet a neighbor. Hockney's blinding, saturated palette mimics the light of Southern California. The Wisemans are surrounded by their prized art possessions, among them an imposing Moderist sculpture in a niche and a totem pole that looks like it could be a third member of the family. Dry humor pervades all elements of the composition. The viewer half expects to see the vertical elements, the stiff couple and their belongings, blast off like spaceships into the blue sky. The threat of the surreal lurking in this picture underscores the consistent relationship between pop art and older movements. Also noteworthy is the manner in which the poses transgress traditional gender norms. Marcia, a full-figured matron in a robe held closed with one arm, bares her teeth and strikes a sensual pose that is both gracious and confrontational. Fred, the man of the house, stands stiffly with his fists clenched and is literally marginalized as he is pushed to the left-hand side. Now, in 1973, Hockney moved to Paris. This is where he lived until 1975. And by the mid-1970s, he was famous. He was known all over. 1974 saw a large traveling retrospective of his work, and a film about him was directed by Jack Kazan. In 1976, Hockney published his autobiography, and in 1978, he settled back in Los Angeles, and this became his permanent home. Now, Hockney began photographing the Grand Canyon in 1982, aiming to photograph the unphotographable, which is to say, space. There is no question that the thrill of standing on that rim of the Grand Canyon is spatial. It is the biggest space you can look out over that has an edge. Now, not many artists attempt to paint the Grand Canyon. One reason is that it is so large. No indicator of depth, distance, or scale can convey it. The other is that the 19th century painter Thomas Morin produced what is considered by many to be the definitive version, a spectacular, monumental canvas so detailed, so complete, and so naturalistic that it is set as unsurpassable standard. Now, unfazed by this precedent and directly inspired by Morin's famous view, Hockney says, intrigued to see how another artist grappled with representing the same vast, heroic space, Hockney produced a bigger Grand Canyon, which is even larger than Morin's canvas. 60 small canvases joined together to create one large view representing just a portion of the canyon. Hockney is poking gentle fun at tourists with cameras, artists with easels, and the absurdity of attempting to map a three-dimensional experience onto a two-dimensional plane. Now, the 1990s constituted a very productive period for Hockney, with a huge number of retrospectives and exhibitions all around the world. From 2000 to 2001, he researched and wrote a book about the old masters, developing a theory that these artists made use of the camera far earlier than previously thought. For his research, Hockney assembled photocopies of old master paintings from the Byzantine art to Van Gogh on a huge wall in his LA studio. While Hockney's theory met with significant resistance, it had gained widespread support from the art history community. In 2002, Hockney moved to the Yorkshire seaside town of Bridlington. In the same year, he sat for 120 hours for a portrait painted by Lucian Freud. In return, Freud sat for 4 hours for him. In 2010, a bigger message was made. Now, this is a painting. It is a accumulation of a series of works by Hockney inspired by the Sermon on the Mount, Claude Lorraine's 1656 painting. Now, Lorraine was one of Hockney's heroes, a French Baroque landscape painter, known for revolutionizing the genre and basing his work on observation. Now, Claude has had a strong effect on Hockney's landscape paintings. In order to create the painting, Hockney spent 3 weeks digitally cleaning the painting by Claude on his computer. Through this process, Hockney got to know the composition better and created a thoroughly contemporary way of painting. Rather than working from life or even from the original work, his inspiration came from a mediated, doctored version of the old master's work. Now, Hockney is fully aware that many art enthusiasts would frown on this process and fully intended to tweak the nose of tradition. He is also, however, following in the footsteps of another renegade, Picasso, who painted Cubist versions of Velázquez's Les Meninas, based in part on reproductions from newspapers and magazines. Distance from the original allows the artist to create his own spin on the scene. Hockney takes his palette not from Claude, but from pop art, and from his own earlier depictions of the Californian and Yorkshire landscapes. He draws more attention to the human figures in the foreground of the image, and represents the mountain as an oversized red rock, imbuing the scene with a distinct sense of drama, which is absent from the original. Now, in 2012, Hockney had a stroke, which for a while impaired his speech. Much to his relief, he says, "The stroke didn't affect my drawing, and that's the most important thing." Now, though his work kind of slowed at this time, people continued to admire him. And in 2018, Hockney's 1972 work, Portrait of an Artist, Pool with Two Figures, sold at an auction in New York City. Now, this became the most expensive artwork sold by a living artist at auction. Can you guess how much this painting sold for? It sold for $90 million. Yes, $90 million he made on this painting. Now today, David Hockney is still alive and with us. He is on lockdown, just like the rest of us in our quarantined world right now. And he is living in Normandy in England with his dog Rudy and 2 of his long-standing assistants, JP and Jonathan. He's in his garden most days, drawing and playing on his iPad. And actually in the past year, with quarantine, with the world in the state that it's been, he has been sharing some of his most recent works. He did a BBC exclusive where he shared 10 of his most recent images, including 1 animation, 9 of which had never been published before. He wanted people to enjoy his artwork at this difficult time. And just kind of wanted to talk about art, get people's mind off of the news cycle and into the art world. Now, what is the legacy of David Hockney? Yes, he is still with us today, but he is still inspired in the art world, and he still has a legacy. Now, in 2011, a poll of British art students rated Hockney as the most influential artist of all time. His work has played a crucial role in reviving the practice of figurative painting as well as landscape painting. Chuck Close, Cecily Brown, and film director Martin Scorsese are among the artists inspired by Hockney. Hockney, still prolific, continues to reinvent himself, embracing contemporary technology. His most recent series of works was produced on an iPad. Despite his widespread fame, he remains an iconoclast steadfastly refusing to accept institutional authority, even some of the highest honors, turning down an invitation to paint a portrait of the Queen. Hockney was very busy and couldn't make it, he said. And the Order of Merit, a knighthood. He states, I don't have strong feelings about the honor system, Hockney has remarked. I don't value prizes of any sorts. I value my friends. So there you have it, everybody. That's David Hockney. We have swam through the life of him. Can you tell me what those 3 key terms were that I brought up in the beginning? They were swimming pools, pop art, and modern. All right, now we are going to take everything we just learned, we're going to pull that all in, and we're going to put it onto paper, okay? I want you to grab your art journal or just a blank piece of paper. I know you got scrap paper in your room. We are going to take what we learned, put it onto paper, help seal it into our brain here. So I am going to flip this camera around. We are going to start off writing his name, writing our key terms, and then we are going to go in to a 5-minute art prompt just to kind of get all what we learned onto paper. So here we go. All right, so you got your art journal here or just a blank piece of paper. I know you got some scrap paper, reuse something. We're gonna take everything we just learned about David Hockney, we're putting it onto paper. So open to a blank page and grab a pencil, grab a pen, whatever your favorite material is. Let's get his name at the top of our paper here. David, D-A-V-I-D, Hockney, H-O-C-K-N-E-Y. And what were our terms? We had swimming pool, because that's kind of what he's most famous for painting, are his swimming pools. We got pop art. That was the main art movement he was in. Of course, he loved Cubism. Of course, he did a little bit of realism. And then modern. He is a modern artist of Britain. So as I said, David Hockney is known for his swimming pools. The Biggest Splash is one of the highest selling paintings in history. $90 million. Hoofda. So you betcha we are drawing a swimming pool today. On the screen here, I am going to pull up a picture of a swimming pool, one of his paintings, and I want you to reference that in creating your own swimming pool today. So this one by him is actually titled Autumn Pool. So I'll pull it up, we'll get started. Remember, this is just kind of about fun, kind of, getting our hands moving, getting this locked into the brain. So don't be hard on yourself if it doesn't turn out exactly as you want it to. It's just kind of fun and something new to try. So here we go. Here's the picture. And how I'm going to start is by putting that horizon line right along the back. So we got that horizon line. You see he kind of imitates trees back there, doesn't he? He has some wispy lines, just kind of imitating foliage back there. So you imitate foliage however you want. I'm just kind of doing some swooshes, kind of like there's bushes back there. Now there's kind of another line back there, kind of the pool deck. Then we've got the line of the pool coming straight across, right? So there's 3 kind of horizon lines. We've got the horizon lines of the trees, the line of the pool deck, and then the line of the pool. Now I'm going about maybe a half an inch in from each side here, and I'm just drawing a diagonal line out. It's going off the side of the page, right? Diagonal line out. There's our pool. And now we got a big diving board here. So I'm drawing just a nice long rectangle coming from the bottom of the page, imitating a diving board. Now you'll notice there's some reflection here, isn't there, from the trees in this painting. So I'm just going to kind of mimic that by doing that wavy, swirly line. And then if you want to add any lines to imitate water, maybe some just kind of wavy lines here. There we have it. Pretty simple swimming pool for us today. Now, you keep adding, keep putting in what you'd like into your sketch. Maybe you've got some colors, some colored pencils, some crayons, some markers around you, and you want to add some of these colors you're seeing, some greens, some blues, some bright color in the diving board. Maybe you want to add more texture, more detail into it. You do you. This is just kind of a fun little art prompt to get you working, to get your hands moving today. I hope you had fun while you're doing it, and I hope you learned something new today. I hope that these paintings and this artist inspired you in your own work. That's the best thing about learning of other artists in the world. When we get to look at this work, learn about their technique, we learn about our own techniques and our own artwork as well. So all you wonderful, beautiful artists out there, thank you for joining me today. I hope that I see you again next time. You all take care out there. Goodbye for now, and happy creating to you all.